Lost letter. Your letters smell like wild mint. This letter was discovered in 1954 during the restoration of a Victorian house in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Found wrapped in oilcloth and hidden inside a cavity wall of what had been a wartime hospital, the letter was written on fine writing paper with ink that had faded to sepia. The envelope was addressed to Lieutenant Samuel Harrison, 5th Pennsylvania Volunteers, Army of the Potomac, but was never posted. 1862 Street Mary's Hospital, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. My dearest Samuel, your letters smell like wild mint, and I don't know why. I've been puzzling over this for weeks now, holding each envelope to my nose before I open it, breathing in that sweet, clean scent that carries me back to that afternoon by Miller's Creek when you asked me to marry you. Do you remember how we sat on that fallen log, our bare feet dangling in the water, while you worked up the courage to speak the words that had been dancing around us all summer? I was picking mint from the bank, braiding the stems together the way Mama taught me, and you were skipping stones across the shallow places. Neither of us talking much, just being together in that comfortable way we'd learned over the months of your courting. Then you cleared your throat. You always cleared your throat when you were nervous, do you remember? And said, "Clara, I've been meaning to ask you something." And I knew, even before the words came, what you were going to say. My heart started beating so fast I was sure you could hear it over the sound of the water. "I know I don't have much to offer yet," you said, still throwing stones but not watching where they landed. "Just my father's farm and these two hands and a promise to work hard every day for the rest of my life. But Clara, I love you something fierce, and I'd be honored if you'd consent to be my wife." I still had those mint stems in my hands when I said yes, still had that sweet smell on my fingers when you kissed me for the first time right there by the creek. Maybe that's why your letters carry that scent. Maybe love itself smells like wild mint, like summer afternoons and promises made by moving water. Or maybe it's just that I press mint leaves between the pages of every letter you send, trying to capture something of that day, something of the happiness we felt before this terrible war separated us. It's been 11 months since you left, Samuel. 11 months and 4 days, but who's counting? Certainly not me, sitting here in this hospital ward surrounded by wounded soldiers, marking each sunrise on the calendar beside my bed like a prisoner counting days until freedom. Your last letter came 3 weeks ago, dated July 30th, written from somewhere near a place called Cedar Mountain. You said the fighting was fierce, but that your regiment held the field, that you were well and thinking of me constantly. You promised to write again as soon as you could find paper and a quiet moment. 3 weeks, Samuel. 3 weeks of checking the mail delivery twice each day, of jumping every time someone calls my name, of inventing reasons why your letter might be delayed. The mails are unreliable, I tell myself. Your regiment is on the march. You're too busy fighting this war to write to a girl back home. But late at night, when the hospital is quiet, except for the moaning of men who cry out in their sleep for mothers and sweethearts, I allow myself to think darker thoughts. I wonder if you're lying wounded somewhere with no one to tend you. I wonder if your name is on one of those terrible lists in the newspapers, the ones I can't bear to read but can't stop myself from checking. I wonder if somewhere in Virginia there's a grave with a wooden cross that bears your name. But then morning comes, and with it, the familiar routine of tending to the soldiers in our care, and I push those fears aside and choose to believe instead that you're simply too busy staying alive to write letters. That somewhere you're thinking of me the way I think of you, constantly, desperately, with a longing that makes ordinary tasks feel like moving through deep water. The work here keeps me busy enough that some hours pass without thoughts of you. Some hours I'm so focused on changing bandages and spooning broth into fevered mouths that I almost forget the ache in my chest that's been my constant companion since you marched away with your regiment. Almost, but never entirely. We've received so many wounded men since the fighting intensified this summer. Boys, really, many of them no older than my brother James, with smooth cheeks and frightened eyes and wounds that make me wonder how human beings can do such things to each other in the name of causes and countries. Yesterday, a young soldier from Ohio, barely 18 by the look of him, grabbed my hand as I was cleaning a bullet wound in his shoulder. "Miss," he whispered, "could you write a letter for me? To my girl back home? I can't hold a pen steady enough, and I need her to know I'm alive." Of course I said yes. How could I not? I sat beside his bed with pen and paper and wrote down his words of love and longing, his promises to come home, his descriptions of how he dreamed about her every night. And as I wrote, I thought of you, wondered if you were somewhere dictating similar words to some kind soul who would help carry your thoughts across the miles to me. The boy's letter was so much like the ones you sent, full of careful optimism, determined cheer, love expressed in the simple language of people who haven't had much practice with fancy words, but know their hearts completely. "Tell her I think about the way she laughs," he said. "Tell her I remember the smell of her hair after she washes it with that soap that smells like flowers. Tell her I'm coming home to marry her just as soon as this war is over." I wrote it all down, sealed the letter in an envelope, and promised to post it with the afternoon mail. But later, making my evening rounds, I found his bed empty, the sheets already stripped and folded. The boy from Ohio had died while I was serving supper to the others, died quietly and alone while thinking, I hope, of his girl's laughter and the flower-scented soap in her hair. His letter sits on my dressing table now, addressed but never sent, and I don't know what to do with it. How do you tell a girl that the boy who loves her is dead? How do you explain that his last thoughts were of her, but that he won't be coming home to marry her after all? Perhaps that's why I haven't posted this letter to you, Samuel. Perhaps I'm afraid that words of love become dangerous once they're written down, that putting feelings on paper makes them too real, too fragile, too likely to be interrupted by death or distance or the terrible randomness of war. But I need to write to you anyway, need to believe that somewhere you're alive and whole and missing me the way I miss you. Need to believe that this separation is temporary, that someday soon you'll come walking up our front path with your uniform dusty from travel and your arms ready to hold me the way you held me that day by Miller's Creek. I've been living with the Hendersons since you left, helping Mrs. Henderson with her household while Mr. Henderson tends to his medical practice here at the hospital. They're kind people, patient with my moods, and understanding when I spend too much time staring out windows or reading your letters for the 100th time. Mrs. Henderson has a son fighting with Sherman down in Georgia, and sometimes We sit together in the evenings, working on our mending while sharing our worries and our hopes. She understands the particular weight of loving someone in harm's way, the way fear becomes a constant companion that follows you through every ordinary task. Love during wartime, she said to me last week, is like tending a garden during a drought. You keep watering and weeding and hoping, but you never know if the rains will come in time to save what you've planted. I think about that often, Samuel, about love as something that needs tending, something that requires faith and patience and the willingness to keep believing even when conditions are harsh. I water our love with letters never sent, weed it with memories carefully preserved, hope for the rain of your return to make it bloom again. Your photographs help. The one you gave me before you left, where you're standing so straight and serious in your new uniform, trying to look like a proper soldier instead of the boy who used to steal apples from Morrison's orchard. I keep it in my apron pocket during the day and under my pillow at night, wearing the edges soft from handling. But it's your letters I treasure most, the ones that arrive with that mysterious scent of mint and carry your voice across the miles. I've read each one so many times I could recite them from memory, but still I unfold them carefully each evening and read them again by candlelight, searching for new meanings in familiar words. You write about the weather and the food and the other men in your company, about battles fought and miles marched and the strange country you're seeing for the first time. But between the lines, I read your love for me, your homesickness, your determination to survive whatever comes and make your way back to Pennsylvania and the life we planned together. I think about our wedding every day, you wrote in your last letter, about how you'll look in your mother's dress, about the ceremony in the little church where we've gone to service all our lives, about the celebration afterward with all our friends and family gathered to wish us well. I think about our wedding too, Samuel, but I also think about simpler things, about sitting beside you at Sunday dinner again, about walking with you through the woods behind your father's farm, about falling asleep beside you every night for the rest of our lives, and waking up each morning grateful for another day together. I think about children we might have, little ones with your dark hair and steady disposition, or maybe my green eyes and stubborn streak. I think about growing old together, about becoming one of those couples who finish each other's sentences and communicate with glances across crowded rooms. But mostly, I think about the moment when this war finally ends and you come home. I picture myself standing at the kitchen window watching the road when I see a familiar figure walking toward our house. Picture myself running to meet you, running faster than I've ever run in my life until I can throw myself into your arms and feel solid and safe and complete again. Will you still smell like yourself after all these months of soldiering? Will your hands still be gentle when you touch my face? Will you still love me the same way, or will this war have changed you into someone I don't recognize? These are the fears I don't write about in the letters I never send, the worries that keep me awake long after the hospital has grown quiet. I've seen what war does to men, not just the visible wounds that we tend here, but the invisible ones that show in their eyes, in the way they flinch at sudden sounds, in the nightmares that make them cry out for mercy in their sleep. Will you have nightmares, Samuel, Will you wake in the middle of the night with your heart racing, reaching for weapons that aren't there? Will you be able to tell me about the things you've seen and done? Or will they become secrets you carry alone? I want to believe that love is stronger than war, that what we shared by Miller's Creek is powerful enough to survive whatever this conflict demands of us. I want to believe that the boy who proposed to me with mint-scented fingers is still there inside the soldier who marches through Virginia, that distance and danger can't change the essential things about who we are together. But I also know that people are fragile, that trauma leaves marks on souls as surely as bullets leave marks on bodies. I know that the man who comes home may not be identical to the boy who left, just as I am not identical to the girl who waved goodbye from the train station 11 months ago. The work here has changed me, Samuel, tending to wounded and dying men, seeing pain and loss up close every day, watching boys younger than my brother draw their last breaths far from home. It's made me older, sadder, more aware of how quickly life can be cut short. But it's also made me more grateful for what I have, more determined to cherish every moment of happiness when it comes. I used to take so much for granted: the sound of your voice, the weight of your hand in mine, the simple pleasure of your company on ordinary afternoons. Now, I know those ordinary moments were actually miracles. And if God grants us the gift of being together again, I won't waste a single one. I've been helping in the garden behind the hospital, growing vegetables for the kitchen and herbs for the medical supplies. Working in the soil with my hands reminds me of home, of the garden we planned to plant together behind your father's farmhouse after we married. Yesterday, I found wild mint growing along the creek that runs behind the hospital grounds. The same sweet scent that clings to your letters, the same clean smell that takes me back to that afternoon when you made me your fiancé. I gathered some and brought it back to my room, crushing the leaves between my fingers and breathing in the fragrance like a prayer. Maybe that's the real reason your letters smell like mint, Samuel. Maybe it's not some mysterious property of paper and ink crossing the great distances, but simply that love itself leaves traces, that the memory of that perfect day by the water somehow infuses everything connected to us. Maybe the scent is my heart's way of keeping you close, of making sure that every letter carries not just your words, but the essence of what we mean to each other. The calendar beside my bed shows that autumn is coming soon. The leaves on the trees around the hospital are just beginning to turn, and there's a coolness in the morning air that makes me think of harvest time and the changing seasons. This will be the second autumn we've spent apart, the second time I've watched the year turn without you beside me. But I refuse to despair, refuse to believe that many more seasons will pass before you're home. This war can't last forever, no matter how fierce the fighting or how stubborn the politicians. Someday soon, the generals will lay down their swords, the soldiers will stack their arms, and the business of rebuilding will begin. And when that day comes, when the last shot is fired and the last battle fought, you'll start the long journey home to Pennsylvania and to me. You'll walk up our front path carrying nothing but a small bag of belongings and a heart full of stories, and I'll be waiting for you with mint from Miller's Creek and all the love I've been saving for your return. Until then, I'll tend to the wounded men who remind me of you. I'll write letters I may never send, and I'll breathe in the scent of wild mint and remember the boy who loved me enough to promise me forever by a creek bank on a summer afternoon. Keep yourself safe, my darling. Remember that you have someone here who counts the days until your return, who holds your letters close to her heart, who believes in the power of love to survive even the worst that this world can offer. Come home to me, Samuel. Come home to mint and memories and a girl who will spend the rest of her life grateful that you chose her to love. I've enclosed some mint leaves in this letter, pressed between these pages like the ones I find in your letters to me. Perhaps they'll carry the scent of home to wherever you are, remind you of creek banks and promises and the girl who waits for you with a heart full of hope and hands that still smell like wild mint when she thinks of you. Your devoted fiancée, Clara. This letter was discovered along with 23 others, all addressed to Lieutenant Samuel Harrison, but never sent. According to hospital records, Clara Morrison served as a volunteer nurse at St. Mary's Hospital from 1861 until 1865. Military records show that Lieutenant Samuel Harrison was killed in action at the Battle of Antietam on September 17, 1862, 3 weeks before this letter was written. Clara Morrison never married. She continued working at the hospital throughout the war and afterward became one of Pennsylvania's first trained nurses. She died in 1923 at the age of 84. A small packet of dried mint leaves was found with the letters, still fragrant after more than 90 years. The letters are now part of the collection at the Adams County Historical Society, displayed as a testament to love during wartime. Lost letter. Dear Mama, I didn't run. I froze. This letter was discovered in 1983 during renovation of a farmhouse near Antietam Creek, Maryland. Found pressed between the pages of a water-damaged Bible, hidden in the walls of what had been a root cellar, the letter was written on camp stationery with pencil that had faded to gray. The envelope was addressed to Mrs. Catherine Miller, Elmira, New York, but was never posted. September 18th, 1862. Somewhere near Sharpsburg, Maryland. 2nd New York Infantry. Dear Mama, I didn't run. I froze. I know that don't make much sense, and I know it don't make me sound any braver than if I had run, but I need you to understand the difference. I need someone to understand what really happened out there in that cornfield yesterday, because if I don't tell somebody the truth, I think it might eat me alive from the inside. The newspapers will probably say we won. They'll write about brave Union boys charging through the corn, about how we drove the rebels back and held the field when the smoke cleared. They'll make it sound glorious, like something from one of those adventure books you used to read to me when I was small. But it wasn't glorious, Mama. It was the most terrible thing I ever seen or hoped to see. And I don't know how to carry what I witnessed yesterday. I don't know how to be the same boy who left your kitchen 6 months ago, all full of fire, and talk about preserving the Union and making you proud. I'm still that boy, I think. But I'm something else now, too, something older and sadder and more frightened than any 17-year-old ought to be. We moved out before dawn yesterday morning. Our whole regiment stretched across that farmer's cornfield like a line of blue scarecrows. The corn was tall, taller than me even, and it rustled in the morning breeze like it was whispering secrets. made me think of home, of the fields around Elmira in late summer when you'd send me out to check if the corn was ready for harvest. But this corn was different. This corn was about to become a killing ground. I was carrying the rifle you seen me off with, the one Pa carried in the Mexican War. Heavy thing, near as tall as I am, and my hands were shaking so bad I could barely keep hold of it. Not from cold, it was warm for September, but from something else entirely. Something that started in my belly and worked its way out to my fingers and toes until my whole body was trembling like a leaf. Sergeant Murphy was walking the line, checking our kit, making sure we all understood the orders. "Straight ahead through the corn," he kept saying. "Don't stop, don't look back, don't think about nothing but moving forward. The Rebs are dug in on the other side, but we got the numbers and we got the right cause, so we'll push them back to Virginia, where they belong." He stopped in front of me and looked me up and down with those hard Irish eyes of his. "You all right, Miller?" he asked. "You look a mite peaked." "I'm fine, Sergeant," I lied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just eager to get started." But I wasn't fine, Mama. I was scared in ways I didn't even know was possible. Scared of dying, sure, but scared of other things too. Scared of letting down the boys beside me. Scared of shaming you and Pa and the memory of all the Miller men who fought in America's wars. Scared of finding out I wasn't brave enough to be a soldier after all. Most of all, I was scared of having to kill somebody. I know that sounds strange. I know you're supposed to think about the enemy as less than human, as devils in gray uniforms who deserve whatever they get. The officers are always telling us about Southern atrocities, about how the rebels want to destroy everything good and decent about our country, but lying there in the corn, waiting for the order to advance, all I could think about was the Confederate boy on the other side who might be no older than me, some farmer's son from Georgia or Alabama who probably joined up for the same reasons I did, because his friends were going, because it seemed like the right thing to do, because he wanted to make his mama proud. What if I had to shoot him, Mama? What if I had to look through my rifle sights at another 17-year-old boy and pull the trigger? What if his last thought was of his own mother, wondering if she'd be proud of how he died? The bugle sounded at 8 o'clock, and we started forward through the corn. At first it was almost peaceful, just the sound of our boots on the soft earth and the rustle of stalks brushing against our uniforms. Some of the boys were talking, trying to keep their spirits up with jokes and boasts about what they'd do to the first rebel they seen. But I couldn't talk. My throat felt like it was full of cotton, and every step forward felt like walking toward my own grave. Then we heard the first shots from up ahead, scattered at first but growing steadier. The boys in front of us had made contact with the enemy pickets. Sergeant Murphy started hollering for us to spread out, to keep moving, to fix bayonets and prepare for close work. That's when the real shooting started. I never imagined anything could sound like that, Mama. It wasn't like the hunting rifles we used back home, with their clean, sharp cracks echoing across the hills. This was thunder, continuous rolling thunder that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Musket balls started whining through the corn like angry hornets, cutting down stalks and sending up little puffs of dirt where they hit the ground. The boy next to me, Tommy Ferguson from Rochester, only 16 but big for his age, he got hit in the shoulder and spun around like a top before falling into the corn rows. Started screaming for his mother, calling, "Ma! Ma!" over and over until somebody dragged him back toward our lines. That's when it happened, Mama. That's when everything I thought I knew about myself just stopped working. I seen the muzzle flash ahead of me, seen the gray uniform behind it, seen the face of the boy who was trying to kill me. He couldn't have been much older than Tommy Ferguson, with brown hair sticking out from under his hat and dirt smeared across his cheeks. He was fumbling with his ramrod trying to reload, and for just a second our eyes met across maybe 30 yards of trampled corn. I had my rifle up, had it aimed right at his chest. All I had to do was squeeze the trigger, and he'd be dead, and I'd be a real soldier who done his duty for God and country and the Union cause. But I couldn't do it, Mama. I couldn't make my finger move that last little bit. I just stood there, froze like a statue, watching him finish reloading, watching him raise his own rifle toward me. I should have died right there, should have paid the price for my hesitation, for my weakness, for whatever it was that kept me from shooting first. But just as he was taking aim, Corporal Jenkins came running through the corn and bayoneted him before he could fire. "What the hell's wrong with you, Miller?" Jenkins shouted over the noise of battle. "You trying to get yourself killed? When you see a target, you shoot it. That's what we're here for." But I still couldn't move. I stood there holding my rifle like it was made of lead, watching that Confederate boy die in the dirt with Jenkins' bayonet in his ribs. He was making little gasping sounds like a fish pulled out of water, and his eyes were still looking at me like he was asking why I hadn't shot him when I had the chance. I don't know how long I stayed froze like that. Could have been seconds, could have been minutes. Time moves different when the world has gone crazy around you and nothing makes sense anymore. All I know is that Jenkins had to grab me by the collar and shake me hard before I could even remember how to walk. "Stay close to me, boy," he said, not unkind, but firm. "Do what I do, go where I go, and maybe we'll both live to see supper." The rest of the battle passed like a nightmare, Mama. We pushed forward through the corn, stepping over bodies of boys from both sides, some dead and some just wounded, and calling for help. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of gunpowder and worse things that I won't put in a letter to my mother. I kept my rifle ready, kept it pointed in the right direction, but I never fired another shot. Every time I seen a target, every time I had a clear shot at a Confederate soldier, something inside me just locked up. My hands would shake, my vision would blur, and I'd find some excuse not to pull the trigger. Maybe he was too far away. Maybe there was a tree in the way. Maybe one of our own boys might get hurt if I missed. Always some reason, always some excuse for my cowardice. But it wasn't cowardice, Mama. I know how that sounds. I know what people would say if they knew the truth. But it wasn't fear that kept me from shooting. It was something else. Something I don't have words for. It was the terrible understanding that the boy in my sights had a mother somewhere who loved him just like you love me. Had dreams and hopes, and maybe a girl back home who was waiting for him to come back. Had stories and jokes and favorite foods and all the million little things that make a person real instead of just a target. How do you kill that? How do you look at another human being, even one wearing the wrong uniform, and decide that your cause is worth more than his life? I don't know, Mama. I wish I did, because it would make everything simpler. It would make me a better soldier, a more useful member of this regiment, a son you could be prouder of. But I can't figure out how to turn off the part of me that sees enemies as people, that understands that every Confederate boy I might shoot is somebody's beloved child. We held the field when the fighting stopped, drove the rebels back across Antietam Creek, and captured some of their positions. The officers called it a victory, said we'd done good work and could be proud of our service to the Union. But walking across that cornfield afterward, seeing the bodies scattered among the broken stalks like discarded dolls, I couldn't feel proud of anything. All I could feel was sick and sad and grateful to be alive, even though I wasn't sure I deserved to be. The boy that Jenkins killed, the one I couldn't shoot, his name was written inside his hat. Property of Daniel Morrison, Macon County, Georgia. 17 years old according to a letter in his pocket, same as me. Had a photograph of a woman who must have been his mother and a lock of brown hair tied with a ribbon that probably came from his sweetheart. I took the photograph, Mama. I don't know why, don't know what I planned to do with it, but I needed to take something of his with me. Some proof that he was real, that he mattered, that his death meant something, even if I can't understand what. Maybe someday I'll find a way to send it to his mother in Georgia. Maybe I'll write her a letter explaining how her boy died, how he fought bravely, how he wasn't alone at the end. Maybe knowing that would bring her some small comfort. Or maybe I'll just carry it with me for the rest of this war, however long that might be. A reminder that every battle is full of Daniel Morrisons. Every victory costs somebody's child. Every defeat means mothers somewhere are crying for boys who won't be coming home. I know what you're thinking, Mama. You're thinking I should have shot him when I had the chance, that my hesitation put other boys at risk, that a soldier's duty is to follow orders and kill the enemy without asking questions. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm too soft for this work, too tender-hearted to be useful in a war. Maybe I should ask for a transfer to the medical corps or the supply train, somewhere I can help without having to kill. But I need you to understand something important. I didn't run. When the shooting started, when boys all around me were falling and screaming and dying, I didn't turn tail and head for the rear. I stayed with my regiment, stayed in the line, moved forward when ordered, and held my position when told to stop. I may not be the bravest soldier in this army, and I may never learn to kill as easily as some of the other boys seem to, but I'm not a coward, Mama. I'm just a 17-year-old who's seen too much death already and can't quite figure out how to add to it with his own hands. The other boys don't know about my hesitation. Jenkins hasn't said anything, and I don't think anybody else was close enough to see what happened. As far as the regiment knows, I did my duty same as everyone else, but I know the truth, and now you know it too. And I needed you to know because you're the only person in the world whose opinion matters more to me than my own. I'm not the hero you sent off to war, Mama. I'm not the brave Union soldier who's going to help save the country and come home covered in glory. I'm just a scared boy who's trying to figure out how to be a man in a world that's gone completely mad. But I'm still your son. Still the boy who used to help you with the washing, who learned his letters at your kitchen table, who promised to write every week and make you proud. I may not be the soldier you hoped I'd become, but I'm still me underneath this blue uniform. Still the boy who believes killing is wrong, even when the government says it's necessary. Still your child, trying to find his way through darkness toward whatever light might be waiting on the other side. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, or the day after that. Don't know if I'll learn to shoot when I need to, or if I'll always freeze up when faced with another mother's son. Don't know if I'll make it through this war alive, or if my hesitation will finally get me or somebody else killed. All I know is that I love you, and I miss you, and I hope someday you'll understand why your boy couldn't pull the trigger when it might have saved his life. Maybe that makes me weak. Maybe it makes me foolish. Maybe it makes me unfit to be a soldier in this terrible war. But it also makes me your son, raised by a woman who taught me that every life has value, that every person deserves mercy, that killing should never be easy even when it seems necessary. I carry your lessons with me into every battle, Mama. They may not make me a better soldier, but they make me a better man. And if I die in this war, and I might, because war doesn't care much about the tenderness of boys' hearts, I'll die as your son, shaped by your love and your values and your unshakable faith in the goodness that exists in every human soul. For just a moment, I was your little boy again, safe in his mother's kitchen, learning to knead dough and believing the world was a good place where bad things didn't happen to good people. I wish I could stay in that dream, Mama. I wish I could go back to being the boy who thought war was glorious and killing was simple and right and wrong were as easy to tell apart as black and white. But I can't go back, can only go forward, and I'll try to go forward as the man you raised me to be, even if that man doesn't fit very well into a soldier's uniform. Keep me in your prayers and remember me as I was, not as this war is making me, your loving son, who didn't run but couldn't shoot, Benjamin. This letter was discovered along with a faded daguerreotype of a young woman and child, and a small piece of paper with property of Daniel Morrison, Macon County, Georgia, written in a childish hand. According to military records, Private Benjamin Miller of the 2nd New York Infantry was killed in action at the Battle of Fredericksburg on December 13, 1862, 3 months after writing this letter. He was 18 years old. The official casualty report noted that Private Miller died while attempting to aid a wounded Confederate soldier during the retreat from Marye's Heights. Witnesses reported that he was shot while trying to give water to an enemy soldier who had been calling for help. His body was never recovered, but his name is inscribed on the New York monument at Fredericksburg National Military Park. The photograph of Daniel Morrison's mother was found among Miller's personal effects and was eventually returned to the Morrison family in Georgia through the efforts of Union chaplains after the war. Lost letter. The crow tapped twice on my window last night. This letter was discovered in 1923 during the clearing of an estate in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Found in a cedar chest alongside pressed flowers and family photographs, the letter was written on heavy cream paper with iron gall ink that had turned deep brown with age. The envelope was addressed to Miss Sarah Elizabeth Hartwell, care of Mrs. Jonathan Hartwell, Cooperstown, New York, but was never posted. October 15, 1862. Hartwell Farm, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. My dearest Sarah Elizabeth, the crow tapped twice on my window last night, and I knew your father was gone. I suppose that sounds like the ramblings of an old woman whose mind has started to wander. But you must understand, child, some things in this world can't be explained by the logic your city schoolmasters taught you. Some things speak to parts of us that are older than books, older than reason, old as the hills themselves. The crow came at 11:30, just as I was banking the fire for the night. Such an unusual time for any bird to be about, but crows? Well, crows are different from other creatures. They see things, know things, carry messages between the world we know and the world we sense, but cannot name. I heard the tapping first, not the scattered pecking of a bird confused by its own reflection, but deliberate, measured taps. Twice, then silence, twice again, like someone knocking at a door asking for entry. When I went to the window and drew back the curtain, there he sat on the sill, black as midnight against the glass. His head was cocked to one side, studying me with those bright, knowing eyes that seemed far too intelligent for any ordinary bird. He didn't fly away when he saw me, didn't even startle, just looked at me as if he'd been waiting for me to appear, as if he had something important to tell me and all the time in the world to say it. "What news do you bring, old friend?" I whispered to the glass that separated us. "Your grandfather used to tease me about talking to animals. Said I'd been raised too far back in the mountains where such habits were common. But mountain folk know things that valley folk have forgotten, child. We know how to listen to the language that doesn't use words." The crow tapped twice more, then spread his wings and flew off toward the north, toward Virginia, where your father has been fighting with his regiment these past 8 months. I watched until he disappeared into the darkness, just a shadow against the star-filled sky. But I knew, Sarah Elizabeth, even before I heard the beat of his wings fade into silence, I knew what his message meant. The house was silent in a way it had never been silent before. Not empty quiet, but the deep, absolute quiet that comes when something essential has been taken away forever. I knew your father was gone. The official letter came 3 days later, carried by young Tommy Morrison from the post office in town. Poor boy could barely look me in the eye as he handed me the envelope with the War Department seal. I suppose my face already carried the knowledge of what that letter contained, because Tommy just mumbled his condolences and hurried away as fast as his legs could carry him. "Mrs. Ezra Hartwell," the letter began, in that cold, formal language the government uses when it has to tell mothers and wives that their boys won't be coming home. "We regret to inform you that your son, Captain Jonathan Wesley Hartwell of the 5th Pennsylvania Infantry, was killed in action on October 12, 1862, during the engagement at Perryville, Kentucky. October 12, 3 days before the crow came to my window. But I knew the moment your father's spirit took its leave of this world, knew it as surely as I know my own heartbeat. The old folks used to say that mothers feel it when their children pass on, that the cord that connects us from birth to death sends one final message before it's severed forever. I felt it, child. Felt something tear inside my chest at 11:30 on the night of October 14th. Not October 12th, mind you, but 2 days later. I've been puzzling over this difference ever since, wondering if it takes time for such news to travel from the battlefield to the world of dreams and shadows and midnight birds. Or perhaps your father's spirit wandered for a time, lost and confused in that strange territory between life and whatever comes after. Perhaps he spent 2 days trying to find his way home, trying to say goodbye to the people and places he loved before accepting that his time here was finished, I like to think that's what happened. I like to think he stood in this kitchen for a moment, watching me make my evening tea, wanting to tell me he was all right, wanting to ease the grief he knew was coming. I like to think he touched the old rocking chair where I used to nurse him as a baby, ran his fingers along the mantelpiece where his childhood treasures still sit a gathering dust. And then, when he realized I couldn't see him or hear him in the usual ways, he sent his message through the crow. Because crows understand the language of the in-between, the language that spirits use when words are no longer possible. Your grandmother, God rest her soul, would have understood immediately. She grew up in the old country where such signs were as common as sunrise and just as reliable. The veil is thin in some places, she used to tell me, when I was no bigger than you were when you last visited. And for some people, it's thinner still. I always thought she meant other people, the old women who read tea leaves and knew when storms were coming, the men who could find water with nothing but a forked stick and their own inner sense. I never imagined I might be one of those people myself. But grief opens doors in us that we never knew existed, child. Grief makes us sensitive to whispers we couldn't hear before, aware of movements at the edge of our vision, conscious of the weight of love that doesn't disappear just because the body that carried it has been laid to rest. The smell came next, the night after the letter arrived. I was sitting in the parlor, trying to distract myself with some mending, when suddenly the room filled with the scent of tobacco. Not the sweet pipe tobacco your grandfather used to smoke, but the harsh, cheap tobacco that soldiers carry in their pockets, the kind your father wrote about in his letters home. The tobacco here is rough, he'd written last spring, nothing like the fine leaf we grow back home. But it helps pass the time during the long watches, and the shared smoke creates a brotherhood among men who might otherwise be strangers. That smell hung in the air for nearly an hour, so strong I could almost see the smoke curling toward the ceiling. I searched the house from cellar to attic, thinking perhaps a neighbor had stopped by and left his pipe burning somewhere, but there was no sign of any visitor, no explanation for that familiar bitter scent that reminded me so powerfully of your father's last leave home. He'd sat right there in his grandfather's chair, smoking and telling me about the war. Not the glorious crusade the newspapers described, but the daily reality of mud and fear and boys dying far from home. The smell of his tobacco had lingered in the furniture for weeks after he left, a comfort to me during the lonely evenings when I missed his company most. Now that smell had returned, as real as if he were sitting there again, as present as if he'd never left for Virginia at all. But when I looked at the chair, it was empty except for shadows and moonlight streaming through the windows. "I know you're here, son," I said aloud, feeling foolish but somehow compelled to speak. "I know you're trying to tell me something." The smell grew stronger then, and I swear I felt a warmth pass through the room, not the heat from the fire, but something deeper, something that seemed to touch my soul rather than my skin. For just a moment, the terrible weight of grief lifted from my chest, replaced by a peace I hadn't felt since the day your father marched away with his regiment. Then it was gone, and I was alone again with my mending and my tears and the terrible certainty that my boy would never sit in that chair again, would never fill our home with laughter and stories and the rich smell of tobacco smoke. But I wasn't truly alone, was I? Because love doesn't die when the body dies, Sarah Elizabeth. Love finds ways to reach across the darkness, to comfort and reassure and remind us that some connections are stronger than death itself. Your father loved this farm, loved every acre and every building and every stone fence his grandfather built with his own hands. He loved the old apple orchard where you used to play when you visited, loved the creek that runs behind the barn where he learned to fish as a boy. He loved the rhythms of this place, planting and harvesting, the changing seasons, the steady cycle of work and rest that has sustained our family for 3 generations. I don't think he's truly gone from here, child. I think his spirit has found a way to remain connected to the land that shaped him, to the home that holds all his childhood memories and dreams. I feel him sometimes in the early morning when I go out to tend the chickens. Feel him walking beside me as I scatter corn and check for eggs, the way he used to when he was small and eager to help with every chore. The chickens seem to sense it too. They're calmer than they've been in months, less skittish, as if they remember his gentle hands and quiet voice. Yesterday, I found one of the barn cats sleeping in the exact spot where your father used to sit when he was mending harness or sharpening tools. That cat had never shown any interest in that corner before, but there he was, curled up as contentedly as if he were keeping someone company. When I called to him, he looked at me with those wise yellow eyes, then settled back down as if he had important work to do. Even the old milk cow seems different. She's been given more milk than usual, and her temperament has sweetened considerably. Your father always had a way with animals. They trusted him instinctively, seemed to understand that his heart held no meanness or impatience. Perhaps they sense his presence still, feel the comfort of his watching over them. The signs are everywhere for those who know how to look, child, not frightening signs, not the restless hauntings that people fear, but gentle reminders that love persists even when the physical form is gone. Your father is not lost to us. He simply changed, moved to a different kind of existence where he can continue to watch over the people and places he cherished in life. I've found this understanding brings me more comfort than all the condolence calls and casseroles our neighbors have been bringing. Their kindness is appreciated, but their words feel empty compared to the solid certainty of your father's continued presence. They speak of him in the past tense, as if he were a closed chapter in a finished book. But I know better. I know he's as much a part of this place now as he ever was, woven into its very essence in ways that death cannot unravel. Your grandfather understood this, I think. In his final years, he often spoke of seeing his own father working in the fields, checking on the livestock, making sure the farm was thriving under his son's care. I used to think it was just the rambling of an old man whose mind was beginning to fail. Now I realize he was seeing truly, recognizing the signs that I'm only beginning to understand myself. There's a wisdom in the old ways, Sarah Elizabeth, a knowledge that we've largely forgotten in our rush toward progress and modern thinking. Our ancestors knew that death was not an ending, but a transformation, not a departure, but a change of state. They expected to remain connected to their loved ones, expected to receive signs and messages, expected the veil between worlds to be thin enough for communication to continue. We've lost much of that wisdom, but grief has a way of teaching us again. Sorrow opens our eyes to possibilities we never noticed before, makes us aware of the subtle language that exists all around us if we only know how to listen. the dreams have been the most vivid sign of all. Every night since the crow's visit, your father has come to me in sleep, looking exactly as he did when he was a boy. Not the man who went off to war, weathered by months of fighting and hardship, but the child I remember from summer afternoons when he'd help me in the garden and chatter about everything and nothing. In these dreams, he's always busy with some task, feeding the horses, mending a fence, splitting wood for the winter fires. He doesn't speak directly to me, but occasionally he'll look up and smile. And in that smile I see all the love and reassurance I need. He's telling me he's all right, that he's still connected to this place, that death hasn't separated us in any way that truly matters. Sometimes, in the dreams, I'm young again, too, and we work side by side the way we did when he was growing up. I feel the satisfaction of shared labor, the comfortable rhythm of mother and son moving through familiar routines. These are some of the most peaceful moments I've known since his letter, telling us he'd enlisted, moments when the war and its sorrows seemed like distant nightmares that have no power over our simple happiness. I wake from these dreams not with the usual sadness that comes from pleasant illusions being shattered by reality, but with a deep sense of gratitude. Your father is finding ways to spend time with me still, to share in the work that always brought us both such contentment. Death may have changed the nature of our relationship, but it hasn't ended it. I want you to know these things, Sarah Elizabeth, because you loved your father dearly, and I know his loss has left a wound in your heart that feels as if it will never heal. But love like ours, the love between family members who have shared years of daily life, who have worked and laughed and worried together, that kind of love creates bonds that are stronger than death itself. Your father hasn't abandoned us. He's simply moved to a place where he can continue to love and protect and guide us, but from a different vantage point. The crow was his messenger. The tobacco sent his greeting. The dreams his way of spending time with me until we can be together again in whatever form that reunion takes. I don't expect you to believe all of this immediately. Your education has taught you to trust only what can be seen and measured and explained by science. But there are older truths than science, child, deeper realities that exist in the spaces between what we think we know and what we actually understand. Keep your heart open to the possibility that your father is still with you in ways you might not recognize at first. Pay attention to the small signs, the unexpected scent that reminds you of him, the bird that seems to be watching you with unusual interest, the dreams that feel more real than waking life. These are the languages that love uses when words are no longer possible. And remember that grief, for all its pain, is also a gift. It's the price we pay for having loved someone so deeply that their absence creates an ache in our souls. But that ache is also a connection, a way of staying linked to the person we've lost. As long as we grieve, as long as we remember, as long as we remain open to the signs they send us, our loved ones are never truly gone. The crow visits my window often now, always in the evening, just as I'm preparing for bed. Sometimes he taps. Sometimes he simply sits quietly on the sill, keeping me company while I finish my daily tasks. I've taken to leaving small offerings on the windowsill, breadcrumbs, bits of cheese, seeds from the sunflowers your father planted last spring. The crow accepts these gifts with the dignity of a messenger who understands his important role. He's become my link to your Father, my assurance that love continues even when life does not. Through him, I receive the comfort I need to face each new day without despair, the strength to tend this farm that your Father loved so much, the hope that someday we'll all be together again in a place where partings are impossible. Until that day comes, I'll continue to watch for signs, to listen for messages, to remain open to all the ways that love finds to bridge the gap between this world and whatever lies beyond. And I'll tend this farm with the knowledge that your Father's Spirit remains part of its very soil, part of its seasons and cycles, part of the ongoing story of the land that shaped him and that he, in turn, helped to shape. Come home when you can, dear child. Come and see for yourself that this place still holds your Father's presence, still echoes with his laughter, still benefits from his watching care. Come and learn the old wisdom that your great-grandmother carried from the mountains, the knowledge that death is not an ending, but a doorway, not a separation, but a transformation. Come and meet the crow who carries messages between the worlds. Come and breathe in the tobacco scent that lingers in the evening air. Come and feel the peace that comes from understanding that love is the one force in this universe that cannot be conquered by death. Your Father is waiting to welcome you home, child, not in the way we might wish, but in the way that's possible now. Open your heart to recognize his greeting, and you'll find that coming home to this farm is not a return to sorrow, but a celebration of love that endures beyond all earthly partings. With all my love and the wisdom that grief has taught me. Your grandmother Martha.